Insurrection in Oklahoma. Black Lives Matter rioters storm the Capitol building, screaming obscenities, putting people's lives at risk. Please, FBI, put up billboards. We must know who every single one of these people are, because we will not stand for insurrection. You know, this is Joe Biden's fault. Joe Biden incited insurrection by going on TV and making a speech saying that we needed justice in this country, that, you know, Obama came out and said it wasn't justice. AOC, they all incited this insurrection. You know, it's funny, right? Because it doesn't matter, right? They can storm the Capitol building in Oklahoma. I get it. It's not D.C. But they've literally stormed, I should say leftist activists have literally stormed into various buildings for the Senate and Congress in the past few years. Remember Brett Kavanaugh when they're banging on the doors of the Supreme Court screaming? Remember when they went inside, what was it? I think it was the Hart building. I'm not entirely sure. And they're on every floor screaming, and they had to shut the building down and get the Congress people out. Not insurrection, though. That's just good old activism. I hope y'all are paying attention, because you have to realize what's happening by now. You're going to get banned from social media. They ain't going to let you speak. And they're going to arrest you if you even so much as step out of line. Now, the leftists, I mean, they literally burned down. Okay, I should say they figuratively burned down cities. Fact checkers sneaking around going to be like, the whole city was not burned to the ground. You get the point. They burned down several buildings, smashed windows, beat people. More than 24 dead from the riots throughout last year. Not insurrection. Peaceful protests. You know, so long as regular people don't care and don't do anything about it, this is just going to keep happening. So here's the story. Black Lives Matter Capitol siege. Well, why are they sieging the Oklahoma State Capitol? An anti-riot bill that CNN says can protect drivers who run over protesters. That's one way to frame it. It's true. I struggled with trying to get the wording right, to be completely honest, because I don't want to be as sensational as that, but it is the truth. Framing is important. And the reason CNN uses this headline is because it's going to alarm you, I suppose. So we did an episode of the IRL podcast, and we said, I'm like, what's the right way to phrase this? Because we don't have that many characters. YouTube doesn't let you use more than, I think, like 100 characters for a title. And so what we're trying to explain is, if you're in your car, you're driving down the road, and a bunch of people are banging on your car and they're screaming, and you hit the gas to get out of there to escape them, you will not be held liable. This is the Florida law. It doesn't mean that you can hit the gas and, you know, run down people on purpose. It means you can't be held liable if you're the victim, if you're being surrounded and people are blocking a street and you're trying to get away. Well, Oklahoma passed their bill. 34 states may have legislation. I think more than 34. I think it's 35, actually, if you include Florida. This is a bill that allows them to go after a wide range of activities and have harsher penalties for it. And I don't think this is a solution to anything. They're saying in Florida that if you're like standing in the street, it could be a felony. That ain't going to solve anything. Here's what's going to happen. A bunch of hippy-dippy protesters will be standing out there with Antifa, and they'll be in the street holding their signs, you know, and yelling. And the cops are going to come and make a bunch of arrests, and they're going to say third-degree felony for blocking the street. I don't like the idea of blocking the street because you can get hit by cars. However, I think the idea of nonviolent civil disobedience must be respected to a certain degree. It's already illegal to block a street. I had a really great argument with Will Chamberlain in the IRL podcast. He's like, no, I disagree. You shouldn't do it. I can understand the health and safety risks, but increasing penalties doesn't change the fact that district attorneys are not arresting people. I'm not prosecuting people. The cops arrest them. The DAs cut them loose. So how will a harsher law make anything better? I'll tell you what's going to happen. How about this from the Wall Street Journal? Almost half of federal cases against Portland rioters have been dismissed. Many charged in connection with violence surrounding last year's racial justice protests have completed community service and won't be tried. It's really obvious it's going to happen, right? You make all the crazy laws in the world. There's no guarantee the DA is going to do anything about it. Sure, I guess in Florida and these red states, they probably will. They're not the same as the blue states like Portland. But now here's what happens. You get a bunch of hippy-dippy people in the street, and they're marching around, they're screaming, they're waving their flags. And then the cops come in, make arrests, charge these people with felonies, and then they scream to the normies, to the politically uninitiated, they're charging us with felonies for just marching peacefully. Well, in that circumstance, I'm mocking the individual because I can only imagine that probably in this instance, they're throwing bricks. But they would claim it was a peaceful protest. And guess what? The media will claim it was a peaceful protest as well. And then a bunch of people who don't pay attention and don't follow politics are going to be like, this is scary. It's Trumpism. It's authoritarianism. It's just propaganda. It's going to keep escalating. And if people will absolutely use this. Check out the story from The Sun. They say the phalanx of over 24 BLM marchers entered the Oklahoma City's House of Representatives, launching fists in the air, chanting, "We will use our voice to stand against corruption and no justice, no peace," according to the local television station Coco. One of the protesters was videotaped hurling expletives. "You're a effing disgrace to the whole country," the bearded man is recorded dressing down a suited man who appears to be urging him and fellow protesters to disperse. The defiant demonstration paused the session and its agenda for a few minutes. Recorded video clips show protesters managing to occupy the fifth floor gallery for a few minutes while legislators were in session. One of them could be seen futilely slamming his gavel to restore order. You think the FBI is going to come in and deal with this insurrection? Nope. Of the various aims of the protest was not only to call out racial injustice, but to show opposition to some of the bills being passed by the legislative body. One such bill granted immunity to motorists who strike demonstrators with their cars to flee a violent protest, the AP reported. See, to flee from people who are attacking you. Let me break this down for you. These people stormed into the Capitol building, demanding the right to victimize people at their own to their own whims. If I am driving my car and y'all start attacking me, I'm allowed to flee, aren't I? What should you do? Do you guys remember during the peak of the riots, there was a woman, I think this was in Virginia, surrounded by rioters screaming and banging on her car. She calls 911 and says, help, I'm surrounded. And they're like, ma'am, what would you have us do? And she was like, I'm surrounded. What do I do? They're jumping on my car. Sorry, ma'am. She was stuck. What could she do? Nothing. It's not her fault. She's the victim there. However, she's a victim. She's in a car. Well, if somebody is going to smash your windows out and drag you out of your vehicle and beat you to death, or at least you fear that may happen, perhaps it's the fault of the individuals jumping on your car who initiated the conflict and the aggression, and not you. Let me give you something. Let me say this. You're riding your bicycle down the street. You're in the bike lane. All of a sudden, a car makes a hard right, hits you. You go down. Guess whose fault that is? The guy who made the hard right turn and knocked you out of the bike lane. Because it's their fault. They're the one who turned blindly and was negligent. But let's say you're riding your bike and you're flying along and you're weaving through cars and you blow a red light. Then a car swerves, crashes, and the person inside hits you on your bike. You go flying and break your spine. Whose fault is it? Yours on the bike. Just because the car is heavier and can cause more damage doesn't mean the person in the car is at fault. If you run a red light on a bicycle, it could be a tricycle for all that matters, a really fast one. You blow the light and a car swerves, crashes, hits you, you get seriously injured. It was your fault. Not only that, if the driver gets hurt, it's your fault as well. How about this? You're riding your bike, you blow the red light, the car swerves, crashes, the driver inside shatters their spine. You're fine. It's your fault. So if you're a regular person and you're walking down the street minding your own business, you get attacked, you can run, you can fight back. If you're driving your car and a bunch of rioters attack you, you are allowed to run to protect yourself. They mad about it. They say the bill was signed into law by Governor Kevin Stitt. Other bills on the House's agenda included one restricting abortion and Senate Bill 2, which if passed would specifically sideline transgender girls from competing in girls' athletics. Now, I don't have that stuff pulled up. We can talk about that in another video. But here we go from CNN. Oklahoma passes a law that can protect drivers who run over protesters. Framing is everything. We're going to call them protesters, rioters. Yeah, but it is true. Protesters. If you're blocking the street, the car has a right to get out of there. I don't see what's wrong with that. Don't attack people in their cars. The issue, I suppose, is where things can get where things get muddy is, let's say there's like 10 people and they're holding hands and they're singing songs in the crosswalk and your car is blocked. Is the driver going to be like, I'm allowed to flee? It's supposed to be that they're banging on your car and screaming and threatening you and you're scared. So I wonder where the line is going to be drawn. CNN reports Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt signed a bill Wednesday granting immunity to drivers who unintentionally injure or kill protesters while attempting to flee. and which stiffens penalties for demonstrators who block public roadways, according to the Oklahoma State Legislature. The state Senate passed the Republican-sponsored legislation 38-10 last week. The bill makes it a misdemeanor, punishable by up to a year in prison and a $5,000 fine for anyone who obstructs a public street during the course of a protest, according to the legislation. Whoa, 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 whoa. Misdemeanor and a fine? I 100% agree with that. When you get a felony, you can't vote, you can't get guns, you can't travel. I'm not okay with that. In Florida, they're saying it's a third-degree felony if you block a street. That's dumb. We want space for nonviolent civil disobedience. If somebody goes in the street and they're waving a sign and they're angry, the cops walk up, arrest them, take them out of the street. They get a slap on the wrist charge. If they keep doing it, the charges, the penalties escalate. But they do, or at least supposed to, get some kind of penalty. Usually it's like community service. Unfortunately, we're seeing the rioters get community service, but it's supposed to be a slap on the wrist. Hey, look, you protested, you disrupted the flow, you blocked people, they're angry. Here you go. You get punished. A felony, in my opinion, makes no sense. That's ridiculous. Misdemeanor, up to a year in prison. It's actually a year in jail. Prison is after jail. It's like I don't know how it works in most places. I can tell you that in Illinois, I'm pretty sure up to a year is in jail, which is different. And then anything past that, you go to prison. So there's like county jail in Chicago in the city proper. And then there's the state penitentiaries, further away. That's prison. A misdemeanor, I'll tell you what's going to happen. If you were a first-time offender, you're in the street screaming, and you're ordered to get out of the street, and you don't, you're engaging in nonviolent civil disobedience, you will get arrested. It's always been the case, and you should get arrested. You will go before a judge, and they will fine you probably $50. This is the maximum. Judges interpret the law and pass down punishment in cases like this. In all likelihood, you will have a prosecutor say, plead guilty, we'll give you a $100 fine. You'll go home today. End of story. That's usually how it'll roll. You make an active choice to go on the street. You make an active choice to demand people pay attention. You have to pay the penalties for that. And I think nonviolent civil disobedience should come with those penalties, but there needs to be room for it. They go on to say, House Bill 1674 also state that drivers cannot be held criminally or civilly liable for killing or injuring a protester if they are fleeing from a riot and there is a reasonable belief they are in danger. Okay, right there. See, I was wrong. If a couple hippies are holding hands singing songs, that ain't a riot. So they say running over protesters. That's the lie, CNN. It doesn't say protesters. It says riot. Riot. Riot is defined. Riot has to be something. Protest, that's not the same thing. Protesters, now I'll tell you this, maybe they might make an argument about blocking a street. But they say during the course of a protest, if you're protesting and you're in the street and you're like, linking hands and, chaining your arms together, yeah, you're going to get in trouble. That's always been the case. Now, if you're going around smashing windows and beating people and setting fires, now people are allowed to escape to save themselves. They should have been the whole time. The bill comes in the midst of a national conversation about policing racial bias and the right to demonstration after months of protests, some of which turned into riots. Hey, okay, there you go. That's how you do it, CNN. Sparked by the death of George Floyd in police custody, Minnesota was again the center of large-scale demonstrations this month. Not only was a former officer convicted in Floyd's death, but calls for justice were reignited by the fatal shooting of 20-year-old Dante Wright. The first days of the protests over Wright's death turned chaotic as some demonstrators threw bottles and launched fireworks, and officers deployed gas and stun guns. We are sending a message today in Oklahoma that rioters who threaten law-abiding citizens' safety will not be tolerated. I remain unequivocally committed to protecting every Oklahoman's First Amendment right to peacefully protest, as well as their right to feel safe in their community, Stitt said. A group protesting the legislation briefly gained entry to the House chambers inside the state capital of Oklahoma on Wednesday. Wait, hold on. CNN, I don't see the word insurrection here. Was that an accident? Did you accidentally forget to use the word riot and insurrection? A group protesting briefly gained entry to the House chambers inside with the House of Representatives freaking out. They're banging the gavel. Insurrection. According to CNN affiliate KFOR, the session resumed after the protesters left the Capitol building. So there was an insurrection at the Capitol, CNN? Look at this. This is a story from Politico. This is from yesterday evening. It was updated. Capitol Police official being investigated for directions to pursue only anti-Trump protesters. Ooh. The ongoing insurrection at the Capitol. They don't shut up about it. It's to them the apocalypse. And I have to wonder who really cares. I got to be honest. There have been news stories that I think are relevant, that I think are important, notably what happened with Officer Sicknick and his death being natural causes, and also stories about the media lying about Trump and Trump being vindicated. But I'll be completely honest with you. I know for a fact, if I do a story about something 4 months old, I ain't going to get views. People just aren't interested. So I'll tell you this. If I make a video and says Trump was right, this happened, it gets very low views. And I know it does. But if it's something about the media lying, I'm gonna cover that anyway, because that's the stuff I care about. I know I'm not gonna get the most traffic because I know nobody cares about Donald Trump. But in that instance, the media being called out is what's important. And and other stories, related to the Capitol, like the Officer Sicknick story. I know people are just like, dude, this was 4 months ago. I don't really care all that much. Well, it makes me wonder about who's reading these stories from CNN, Politico, and watching the TV, watching these news stories. Are people really trapped in Trump world? Imagine how sad that must be. It's like you're trapped in a time vortex where you're banging on an invisible barrier of January 7th and every other person is moving forward in time and you're like, no, don't leave me trapped here. Trump is everywhere. These people live in Trump derangement reality. Trump is the only thing they can talk about. They can't see anything out of it. And the media now, almost 4 months later, just keeps going, the Capitol, the Capitol. And the rest of us are like, what happened in Minnesota? What's happening with Chauvin? Some of my most viewed videos happened in the past week with the Chauvin trial on my main channel, youtube.com/Timcast, because this is relevant today, because the riots are happening now, and people want to know what's going on with the riots and law enforcement and these laws and what Black Lives Matter is doing. They're not interested in reading a story or listening to a conversation about what happened 4 months ago. So who is listening to this trash? Who's clicking on these links? I guess me, when I pull the story up and rag on them. But maybe they do have a broad viewership. It just so happens that they're trapped in the past. They can't escape. Their Trump derangement syndrome it's got them all wrapped up. They're trying, though. Jimmy Kimmel, I guess, is making fun of Tucker Carlson. It's the best you can do, dude. Tucker Carlson? Jeez, man. These guys really have nothing to talk about. They built up an audience of Trump derangement syndrome personalities. So now y'all are talking about Tucker? Dude, I get it. Tucker's a famous guy. But he hosts one show on one network. That's it. He's not the president. He's not passing laws. He's a dude with opinions you don't like. I tell you, they need their boogeyman, though. So they're trying. Because maybe they realized we have to do something that's not Trump, but the only people who watch us are the anti-Trump crowd. Too bad for them. You reap what you've sown. I'm always going to talk about current events, and I mentioned this the other day. People are like, what are you even going to talk about without Trump, Tim? I'm like, dude, I've been doing this for a decade. I talk about whatever's happening. I give my thoughts on it. I, used to be on the ground. Now, companies growing, expanding. I talk about my thoughts on what's going on in the world. That involves protests from Black Lives Matter. I've been covering protests more than I've covered politics. I never even used to cover electoral politics. As I always mention, we did a video on Birds of Prey last year. A movie. It was great. Talking about movies and culture. And I was talking about The Falcon and the Winter Soldier like 3 nights in a row last week. These people are trapped. The only thing they can think of is Trump. The Capitol. It was an inside job. The Capitol Police are being investigated. Oh no. Insurrection. Meanwhile, they're going around with impunity, burning things down. And this is what we get. There's a tweet from Kimberly Klacik. You may know her. She ran for office in Baltimore. 500 officers short. This was reported December 22nd. It's a quick Google search. I just pulled it up because it's the example, it exemplifies what I'm talking about. Kimberly was saying that 700 officers they're short 700 officers in Baltimore. And it's going to be one of the bloodiest and deadliest years on record. Well, it was reported in December that Baltimore is bleeding officers. More officers quit than hired in 2 years. Good for these cops, man. My respect. You don't, if the people say we don't want you here, you should leave with dignity. And if the people take you for granted, leave with dignity. And then maybe they'll figure it out. Maybe they won't. My attitude's always been this. If the anarchists and the leftists are right, and the leftist anarchists are right, that there will be a utopia without police, then let them have it. If you believe that it will be chaos and Mad Max, then let them have it. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't necessarily, I think things will be bad because I grew up in Chicago. I know what it's like without cops. But hey, maybe they're right. Sure, fine. I don't care. Look, Michael Malice comes on the IRL podcast from time to time, and he's a very, very smart guy. And he doesn't like police, and he's very much in favor of, I believe, if it's fair to say, abolishing the police. He rags on him quite a bit. I just don't want to put words in his mouth. But he's not a stupid person. He's smart. And he's more of a, anarchist. So, okay. I hear these arguments, and I'm like, okay, let's give people their no police, and I will be the first to say I was wrong if we have a utopia. The only issue, I guess, is that we've already seen murder skyrocketing as police departments are being defunded. So I'm kind of feeling like, I'm right on this one. We definitely need police reform. We definitely need to work through a lot of problems with the police department and problems of a lack of accountability. I've always maintained we need reforms. But without cops in big cities? Look, man, somebody was murdered outside of my apartment in Brooklyn. What are we supposed to do if there were no cops? 2 cops got murdered, actually. Let's just say it was 2 random people. What would we do? Just leave the body on the ground? Have the murderer walk around with his gun shooting at people? That's insane. The cops gave chase. He fled, and when he got cornered, man took his own life. It's a tragic story. It is. But should we have let this guy just romp about shooting people? I guess that's what they want. But I'll tell you this. Hey, I'm pro 2A. Very much so at this point. So I move out to the middle of nowhere. I buy some guns. We don't got a local police department. We have a sheriff's office. So be it. Don't come on my property. We got stand your ground laws. That's all that matters. You want to live in a big city without cops? That's your vote. You do it with my blessing. But this is what you get. Right now, Black Lives Matter storms the Capitol in Oklahoma City. In insurrection. Nothing. They just scuttled out. You can go. Bye-bye. Nothing. But the left gets what they want. Their terror campaign was successful in many different ways. Police officers are quitting en masse, and I think they should. I think they shouldn't stand for this. And I think if it's twofold. The people ask you to leave, you leave. Don't stand there in indignity. Just go and say, be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. Baltimore is going to get bad. And it's not the only Baltimore. It's going to be New York. It's going to be Minneapolis. We already saw the crime skyrocketing in Minneapolis. But there you go. So long as these leftists can storm their capitals with impunity, this will keep happening. And I think the cities will suffer because of it. They already are. These young leftists don't seem to know or care, probably because they don't own stores, they don't own property, they don't own homes, they don't have families. Maybe they'll care in 10 years. They'll all become weirdo conservatives. I doubt it, though. We'll see. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.